So let me show you here where I'm going to do a 3 value. And I'll start it exactly the same. I'm working with the same images that we did in the drawing lecture. But I will first build these instead of sketching them and going kind of with a cross-hatching or directional with the planes. I'm going to just work in value. And I'm first going to, once again, frame that house with just 2 values. So as you can see, I'm building in. And as always, I'm doing very little erasing. You know, inspiration comes on the go. If I'm erasing all the time, I'm going backwards. So go forwards. There's a few places I might have to pull out for value change, or if you make a big mistake. But you're far better doing hundreds of these than doing one that takes you an hour. Do hundreds that take you a few minutes. Once again, it's a great advantage of being able to watch online is you get to see a lot more demos because there's just only so much time we have in our day. So this has been sped up. I think it's twice as fast. I think it's 23 minutes or so. Total time it took me to do all 8 of these thumbnail sketches. So it's not a lot of time that you're investing, but the knowledge you're going to gain is immense. So here I saw the dark value of the distant buttes and then pulling in just a few dark shapes I'm seeing in that foreground. And because I'm working in 3 values, this value is close, but the other clouds are going to, and the sky is going to have to come down a bit in the value I'm perceiving, just because my limitation in values. As you're drawing and sketching these, trying it yourself, where's the time come from? Where you want to get better and you want to become a better artist, where's that time come from? Well, we have to be careful because a thief of our time is still a thief. So if you're spending too much time, you pull it at night. Are you playing video games? Are you watching a movie? Are you on social media? If you add up those hours that you're spending on during the day, can you cut some into that? Sleep is always, you can cut into that. I had friends in art school who tried to cut down, I don't recommend this, tried to cut down like a half hour of sleep every semester so they could eventually only sleep a few hours. But try to find that time. Find the time to put in the pencil mileage, the brush mileage to improve. So you can see as I'm doing this, I'm looking for those dark shapes and really getting that separation. The reason we can see shape and form is because of value, because of light. Sunlight is what's lighting things to give it a light side and a dark side to give us some sort of value pattern. And on these, I'm going to get into composition later. On these, we're just working on our observation skills. We're taking the image and kind of taking it face value and developing it from what we see, because this is the first skill we want to build before we start rearranging and moving things. Just a few marks to get the values down. When you start painting shapes and not things, you start looking at this as I'm putting in this side. I'm seeing that as one big dark value. I'm not getting caught up in all the details of the rocks and different trees and stumps and bushes. Is start looking at a shape. You're trying to see the whole in these. You're not, one other thing is working smaller. Why they're called thumbnails is I'm not getting caught up in the minutia. I'm really trying to find some sort of value structure to build on and trying to see it as a whole. And when you start doing these out on location, you can even do it, from reference, but in nature, you're having a conversation with nature. You're really trying to unlock the secrets of how form works and how light works with different materials. As you can see, I'm doing my best to try to get the right values in the right place, but you're having to make decisions, and that's the beauty of a limited value range. At this point, because I only have 2 values, I'm going to include, the white water of the ocean and the light side of that cliff. They're not really the same value, but I'm having to hold them at 2 values. I'm going to have to hold those about the same. Once I develop or bring in another value, I'm going to be able to get some separation. I'm putting in the ocean, because that's definitely a darker value. And now moving in this, we have to treat the sky, the lake, the snow. Once again, that's going to all be 1 value. Knowing that on this, I'm going to be pulling in 2 more values after. And as everything else I talk about in painting and sketching, these should be fun. You're taking a lot of problems or decision making out of the process. So these shouldn't take a long time, and they should be fun. Maybe not at the start, maybe not your first one, your first 10, but they will be. Here I've now switched into black and white and the grayscale because I'm comparing to see how I did and to show you how I did. Do you agree, do you disagree with the way I've handled it as a 2 value? I don't recommend doing this before. I recommend doing it after you've done your sketches. If you do it before, it's translating far too much for you, and it might not even be correct in the value you're perceiving. And then also when you go outside, where does that put you? You know what, you want to start training yourself either outside or from reference to what's your idea in this. So I've put in, you know, you can see there, I put in my lightest value so that's not quite white, but it's a high value. And now I'm putting in the mid value for the ocean, the light value for the trees. Mid-tones, just seeing for, you know, some direction, some interest in that foreground, and that's it. You know, it's really not a lot. I'm just taking that extra value there to put in the ocean to just show that much more information. But you can see it's not a full rendering. That's not what we're trying to do here. And doing this, I mean, this one is tricky because of the values in there, because I started with 2 value, but trying to translate it, trying to economize those. And then now having that extra value on those distant buttes or mountains, you know, that really helps you show some form and some shadow. And a lot of times in these points in these sketches, you get the opportunity to decide, okay, I thought that was too light, I can come back because it was competing with what's below. I don't paint every thumbnail that I have ever drawn. A lot of these thumbnails, this is as far as they go. I can have the decision of, hey, I don't think this is worth developing any further. If I had more values, that distant house in the shadow, I probably would have pulled it up a value from the ground. But once again, I'm holding it to 3, so I don't want to go further. But you can see with 3 what it's doing. It's really helping you get back into the design, getting back into those distant buildings being lit. Where if I have too many values in the foreground, it's just going to be that much harder to get back. And in the one with the shacks on the beach example, I can use temperature. Once I get to color, I can use temperature to get that variation. This is a famous spot Thomas Moran has painted in Wyoming on the Green River. Interesting to see it from different angles and try to get some design there. Because I have my big shapes, now I can put in medium and small shapes here. Once you get in that kind of that, like I keep mentioning, that architecture, the foundation with the 2 value, the harder you work on that 2 value, it just sets it up to be more fun when you have extra values. All I did here is it just had too much line work, and so it's going to get confusing when I start putting that other value where I see these lighter trees and boulders getting some ambient or skylight bouncing back in there. That's what's cooling them so much. And here, you know, that 1 value, I can choose is that value. In the shack example, I was using that middle gray value as a shadow area. On this one, I'm using it as a light area, but I'm also using it in the ambient light on those trees. So you can see how I'm really kind of stretching those 3 values. It's work. It's not easy to do this. It's really going to tax your brain to start reducing. It's much easier to put a lot more values, but the payoff is so big as you start getting better and using this. I wish I did this in school because I think I would have been able to advance my design much earlier in my career. Here, as I was mentioning, I was using the cliff and the whitewater as the same value, but now I'm going to get that separation and visually say, one, its local color is much darker, but the plane is also in a different direction, so I'm going with a darker value. I'm trying to talk while you see this, so kind of get my thought process. But if you want to watch it again and put it on mute, I think there's a lot of things you could be learning from just watching the process. Once again, in these distance, I'm holding those values all to the same value. Same with the foreground cliff. So when I eventually do the painting, I'm going to have to be using temperature to give some distance, to give some change of space back there. And remember too, and I'll say this a lot more, I'm sure, when I'm painting, but I'm not a dictionary, I'm not an encyclopedia, I'm a poet. At least that's what I think of myself when I'm painting. So I'm not ever trying to achieve photorealism. I'm trying to take some notes that will help me eventually in my painting, and even when I am painting, to design interesting graphical shapes to create interest when you look at the picture, to entertain the eye as you go through the different types of shapes, the different size, large, medium, small, and their location. Much more than I'm trying to be a photographic representation of what I'm seeing in the reference.